And hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Today on ABC News Live, one of former President Trump's closest allies appearing in court as his trial gets underway. Jury selection starting in the case against Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, facing contempt of Congress charges for refusing to testify before the January 6th committee. Could he land behind bars? Also ahead, newly released body cam footage from the deadly school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, showing the moments after the gunman entered Robb Elementary. We're learning troubling new findings from the first comprehensive report on the massacre. The reaction from victims' families straight ahead. Another deadly mass shooting in America, this time at a... But we begin with jury selection now underway in the trial of Steve Bannon, former President Trump's ally and chief strategist. Bannon arriving in court where he faces charges of contempt of Congress for refusing to testify before the House committee. Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest for us.
After months of public posturing and open defiance of a congressional subpoena, Steve Bannon is about to go on trial. Bannon faces 2 counts of contempt of Congress in a trial that begins today with jury selection. Although Bannon was fired as a White House chief strategist just 7 months into the Trump presidency, he remained a loud and confrontational Trump ally. The January 6th committee subpoenaed Bannon last September.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Pointing to his own words one day before the attack.
It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
Bannon refused to cooperate, citing executive privilege, the right of a president to receive confidential advice. But Bannon's claim was highly questionable. He did not work for the White House on January 6th, and in fact had been fired 3.5 years earlier. In October, the House voted to hold Bannon in criminal contempt, the committee saying he had, quote, specific knowledge about the events planned for January 6th before they occurred. Bannon faces 2 counts of criminal contempt. If he is found guilty, he could face up to 2 years in prison. Kira?
All right, John Carl will be following every detail. ABC's Ike Ejiochi now joining me now with more. So, Ike, the judge denied Bannon's attorney's intended defense, right? So where does that leave the case now?
Well, the case right now is a very narrow case and will likely be a very quick case. Now, before this case even started, Judge Carl Nichols released a set of rulings that limit the kinds of defenses Bannon attorneys can implement in this case. The ruling says Bannon's attorneys cannot say executive privilege was used. They said that Bannon cannot say that he was following the advice of his lawyer. The ruling even said that the prosecution only has to determine that Bannon acted deliberately and intentionally to defy the January 6th panel. Now, Bannon's attorneys have complained, saying this leaves no defense for my client whatsoever. And Judge Nichols says agreed. Now, right now, expect Bannon's attorneys to try to fight vigorously to ensure that that nobody seated on the jury trial knows of any of Steve Bannon's previous political affiliations or actions.
So Bannon did offer to testify, though prosecutors call that pretty much a last-ditch effort to try and avoid accountability here, right? So will the committee eventually hear from Bannon?
Well, here's the thing. Bannon tried twice to delay this hearing. Once by saying that it should be postponed because of the public nature of the January 6th investigations. Said it'll taint any kind of member sitting on a jury. 2, he just last week said that he's willing to testify publicly to give the committee what they want. But then the committee came out and said that was a stunt. But what we're seeing right now is the fact that this is in trial right now, this contempt of Congress, and the likelihood of getting any kind of information now that Steve Bannon is in trial and likely will be adjudicated rather quickly is slim to none. So that information that House Select Committee wanted to find out from Bannon, where he was the night before January 6th at that Willard Hotel in D.C., that's unlikely they'll ever get that information moving forward.
And just one more question. You know, the committee has now subpoenaed the text messages that were deleted by the Secret Service. We reported on this last week. Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California, who sits on that committee, says they expect to have them by tomorrow. So what do they want to know?
Well, they want to provide the American people with a full picture of what happened that day on January 6th. And we now know, based on the recent hearings, that the Secret Service could have allegedly been heavily involved with interactions with Donald Trump and other members of his inner circle. The Secret Service agency, they've come out and they said they've been participating with the House Select Committee since March of 2021. So for the past 18 months, the Secret Service, they've voluntarily provided dozens of hours of formal testimony and over 790,000 unredacted emails, radio transmissions, and operational and planning records. However, in terms of those text messages that are allegedly deleted, they called any kind of attempt to intentionally delete text messages. The Secret Service says that is just simply something that did not happen, and they're remaining to that. So we're going to get those text messages likely tomorrow, and the House Select Committee will present them on Thursday to the American people. That's where we'll see what happens after that. Kira.
All right. Stay tuned. Ike, thanks so much. And the first detailed investigative report into the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde is finally released. That report describing a series of shortcomings and failures of the school district and law enforcement who, quote, failed to prioritize saving the lives of innocent victims over their own safety. Waiting 77 minutes to confront that gunman as he took the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers. ABC's Maria Villarreal has the latest, and we want to warn you, of course, this video is pretty disturbing to watch.
Oh, shots fired! Get inside! Go, go, go!
A first-hand look at the Robb Elementary School shooting just minutes after the suspect made his way inside, firing more than 100 rounds in 2.5 minutes. The city of Uvalde now releasing body camera footage after a new report found systemic failures in law enforcement response. Just 5 minutes after the shooter first walked in, at 11:38 a.m., a school district sergeant walks out to relay information that later turned out to be wrong.
He's inside this building. We have him contained.
But the suspect was inside room 111 and 112 and still shooting.
Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? It's my wife's classroom.
Officer Ruben Ruiz is inside the hallway responding, while his wife, Eva Mireles, a teacher, is in room 112, texting him. She would not survive. Now, nearly 8 weeks after the murder of 19 children and 2 teachers, the city promising transparency as the first comprehensive report investigating officers' response reveals widespread lapses both before and during the killing spree. The damning 77-page report from the Texas House Special Committee noting that despite 376 law enforcement officers on the scene, there was egregious poor decision-making on all levels.
The report says if you're not willing to put the lives of the people you serve, of those children, before your own, in my view, you should find another job.
The rampage lasted 77 minutes until Border Patrol agents breached the classroom, killing the gunman at 12:52 p.m. School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo testified that they prioritized getting children evacuated over approaching the attacker. My thought was, we're a barrier. Get these kids out.
We need to get these kids out of here. Come on, kids, come on.
While officers evacuated students, Chief Arredondo tried to talk to the gunman.
This could be peaceful. Could you tell me your name? Anything I can know, please?
That gunman firing 142 rounds, the majority before any first responders even entered the building. But there were still survivors in the classroom while officers waited outside.
Child on the phone, multiple victims. A child just called if they have victims in there. Call 911.
Dispatch heard telling officers there were survivors, but it would be at least 47 more minutes after the first 911 call before they finally went in. The committee stating, given the information known about the victims who survived through the time of the breach and who later died on the way to the hospital, it is plausible that some victims could have survived if they had not had to wait 73 additional minutes for rescue. The report also found a breakdown of school safety measures. The school's alert system delayed due to Wi-Fi issues. And none of the 3 exterior doors to the school's west building were locked, giving the shooter unimpeded access. The committee confirming he walked inside room 111 through a door with a lock that had been broken for months. A possible motive also released in the report. The shooter was a former student of Robb Elementary School and attended 4th grade in room 111. His former teacher testified he was bullied that year. The mother of Rogelio Torres, one of the 4th graders killed on that day in May, continues to fight for accountability and change.
That's what I'm here for, to fight for my son, fight for the other kids, and fight for the teachers that lost their lives that day.
A lot of these families are calling for these officers to be charged criminally, but right now that is in the hands of the district attorney. And so far, all she has released is information on the fact that this is still under investigation by the Texas Rangers and the FBI. And she's not saying whether or not any of the officers could or would face charges. Kira?
Okay, we'll follow it. Maria Villarreal there in Uvalde, thank you. And the trial has begun for convicted Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz. Cruz pleaded guilty for killing 17 people at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High in 2018. And now 12 jurors will decide whether he will get life in prison or be put to death. At the start of today's proceedings, the judge asked one of the jurors about a conversation she may have had about this case at a doctor's appointment. She said she did not discuss the case. So far, this hasn't impacted the trial. ABC News contributing and managing partner at the Cochran firm, Shawna Lloyd, joining me. Also, ABC News contributor and former NYPD chief of detectives, Robert Boyce. All right, let's talk about what's going to take place starting now. Shawna, opening statements have begun. Has anything stood out to you so far?
One of the most interesting things about opening statements so far is that they were very clear about the timeline when these statements came out. And what they essentially did was show that some of these statements and intentions were before some of the most traumatic events that have happened recently in his life. And that is really an attempt to undercut the mitigation that you're going to see the defense put forth later, saying that these traumatic events, the death of his mother, being relocated, had effects on his mental state. So that was very important for the state to underscore today.
So, Bob, this tragedy inspired a wave of youth-driven advocacy to push for gun control. As you know, we've covered so much of that. How could that impact how jurors view this case? Because clearly those movements went viral.
It did. It did not affect them. It's something wholly different. This jury has a difficult task in front of them. They not only have to determine his fate, whether it's life or imprisonment or death penalty, but they also have to endure this graphic evidence. So that'll come down to a parade of difficult things to watch and to walk through. And in the end, the impact statements by the victims' families, a terrible thing to endure as well. So this thing is this happened 4.5 years ago, and now we're just looking at it now and just thinking we're trying to figure out exactly where should we go. We're still making mistakes on these protocols. We can't do this. I'm hoping we see something in this trial that changes part of those protocols and training when you go forward.
And Shawna, the defense actually requested a delay in the sentencing for Cruz following the mass shooting in Uvalde to try avoid being unfairly influenced. It was denied. So could the timing of this trial change anything here?
I mean, there's always a possibility. These jurors don't live in a vacuum, and they are aware. However, let's keep in mind they are instructed that it is to be their verdict should be based solely on the evidence presented in this particular trial, and those events should not be factoring into their consideration.
All right, so finally, Bob, in his opening statements, the state attorney did talk about how the school shooting was premeditated. He said that Cruz made a cell phone video saying that he was going to be the next school shooter and planned to kill at least 20 people with an AR-15. He was detailed. So why bring up this piece of evidence?
Well, it's key to see how long he planned it and his mindset, too, and how many people saw it and didn't respond to it. This individual had a lot of problems in his life, there's no question. But there's a lot of people who have emotional issues going forward, but they don't do this. So how long, when did he start acquiring the ammunition? What statements did he make afterwards? 300, he walked into that school with 300 rounds, incredible amount of ammunition. So that all needs to get put into the record to show how long he's tried this.
Bob Boyce, Shawna Lloyd, thanks, guys. We'll follow it all throughout the day. Coming up, the historic and deadly heat wave scorching parts of Europe as firefighters battle wildfires in France. Our team is on the front lines there in the fire zone. We'll take you there when we get back. So glad you're streaming with us today. Well, more than 1,000 people have now died in Spain and Portugal due to a record-breaking heat wave. Firefighters are having trouble containing the forest fires in France, Spain, and Portugal as they destroy thousands of acres of land. ABC's Inez de la Cuetara is in southwest France with more on what's going on. Hi, Inez.
Kira, yeah, and you can see this checkpoint here is as far as we can get. More evacuations are underway here in southwestern France as two fires continue to rage. More than 14,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. More than 1,000 firefighters are still struggling to contain two fires. We spoke with firefighters this morning. They tell us that conditions have worsened, that today could be the worst day that they have faced so far. They're facing temperatures of up to 110 degrees. And then the winds. The winds are a huge part of the problem, the constantly changing winds and the winds getting stronger as well. It's not just France. We're seeing scorching heat and strong winds across Europe. So in Spain and Portugal, more than 1,000 deaths have been linked to the heat, and dozens of wildfires are raging there as well. The UK could also be seeing its highest temperatures in recorded history this week. And as for here in France, firefighters are hoping for a little bit of a cool down starting tomorrow. Temperatures are expected to drop starting tomorrow. Kira?
All right, Inez de la Cuetara there. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, back here at home, Senator Bernie Sanders says that Senator Joe Manchin is intentionally sabotaging President Biden's agenda after Manchin said he wouldn't support Democrats' climate change legislation. Take a listen to this.
So when Manchin sabotages climate change, this is for future generations. What's going on right now in the West, all over the world, we're looking at significantly increased more and more heat waves. You're going to look at more drought, more flooding. This is an existential threat to humanity.
Now, Manchin says he wants to see inflation rates go down before adding any measures that could add to the rising costs. He says that he would back a bill that focused solely on health care measures like prescription drug prices. ABC's Kenneth Moten joining me now live for more from here in our nation's capital. So, Kenneth, how are Democrats reacting to the latest rebuke from Joe Manchin now?
Well, Kara, no surprise, they're not happy, especially the progressive wing of the party. You heard Bernie Sanders there, as they see this Joe Manchin effect really unravel and tank the Biden agenda. But many supporters of those climate change initiatives and tax increases on the wealthy will point out this is not only about the Biden agenda. As you just saw in Inez's report there, many Democrats and supporters of those initiatives believe that this is about saving the country, saving the world, that the opposition from Joe Manchin is bad for the country here. Our political watchers also say that Democrats have a choice to make here. Try to put public pressure on Joe Manchin, the conservative from West Virginia, something that hasn't worked in the past, or try to work with him on key health care measures that he's indicated he's for. And the reality, Kira, here is that Democrats, if they want to get through some of those key health care measures like allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, they're going to need Joe Manchin.
So what does this mean for the fight against climate change now then?
Well, it means legislatively, the U.S. appears to not be in the fight here because we looked at the numbers here and we know that with the opposition from Republicans and Democrats having that very, very thin majority to get this done, there were a number of things in the Build Back Better, the social spending plan that Joe Biden proposed, and it was at least more than $500 billion to green energy and climate initiatives that won't go toward the fight of climate change.
All right, Ken Moten for us here in D.C. We will follow it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has suspended his two top law enforcement officials, citing that more than 600 cases of alleged treason by government personnel. And it comes as Russia is stepping up its devastating attacks on civilian targets. Senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell has the latest now from Kyiv.
Ukraine on high alert as President Zelenskyy warns there are hundreds of cases of treason and collaboration by his own security services with Russia. In a dramatic move, the head of Ukraine's security services, Ivan Bannons, and the Prosecutor General, Irina Vendiktova, who was in charge of investigating war crimes, have both been suspended for failing to deal with culprits. In a televised address, Zelenskyy saying connections detected between the employees of the security forces of Ukraine and the special forces of Russia pose very serious questions to the relevant leaders. Bannons, a childhood friend and business partner, has come under criticism for security breaches since the beginning of Russia's invasion. Vendiktova, seen here meeting with U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland just last month, also under fire for Russian collaborators in her department. This as Russian strikes ramp up in the south. Over the weekend, pounding the coastal cities of Mykolaiv and Odessa. The Russian defense minister releasing video of Defense Minister Shoigu in the region where he urged the troops to step up operations across Ukraine.
Well, Kira, the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu on this trip to the east of the country, meeting with the general who's commanding Russian forces there and instructing them to give priority to these long-range precision-guided weapons systems and to try and find them and to destroy them. Now, that's also likely a reference to the US HIMARS. There's been a lot of reporting about them. They are these long-range precision-guided weapons systems. They are quite mobile and they seem to be proving effective on the battlefield. But the Ukrainians, although they're grateful for them, are saying, look, in order to win this war, we don't need 12 of them, we need 112. Kira?
Our Ian Panel there in Kyiv for us. Ian, thanks. And coming up, dramatic video of a passenger plane crash landing and flipping on the runway. Well, we're learning about what happened as soon as we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. The accused gunman in what prosecutors say was a racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo has pleaded not guilty to federal hate crime charges. 19-year-old Peyton Gendron arraigned today in federal court. He's accused of killing 10 people at that supermarket back in May, all of those victims black. 3 people were killed in a deadly mall shooting just outside of Indianapolis on Sunday. A 22-year-old who police say was legally carrying a firearm is the one who stopped the shooter. Police say the gunman was armed with several magazines of ammunition. A passenger flight with 30 people on board crash-landed in Mogadishu today, with the plane actually flipping over on the runway. Thankfully, no fatalities. That cause of the crash has not yet been determined. People around the world celebrating Nelson Mandela International Day, honoring the legacy of the anti-apartheid leader. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, going forward to become South Africa's first black leader. The UN established this day on his birthday, not just to honor the work that he did, but also to inspire people to make a difference in their communities. I'm Kira Phillips. ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis. A lot more news ahead. Stay with us.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.